Hello, and welcome to Cry Havoc Wargaming, dedicated to bringing you the uncommon. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Ron, and today we're going to do a review and description of Dux Britanniarum by Too Fat Lardies. So let's get started. Recently in my comment section down below, I was asked if I might do some videos of Dux Britanniarum. I had mentioned it in a program where I was discussing Midgard. I'm looking at upgrading my Dux Britanniarum forces to a larger number so that I might play Midgard. Midgard uses about 50 figures. This game uses about 30 to 40 figures, so I needed a couple extra figures that I'm in the process of painting and working those out right now. But I thought, well, you know, I might as well. I have two armies. I have a Saxon and a Romano-Brit army. So Dux Britanniarum is not a new game. It was printed several years ago by Too Fat Lardy. It received a lot of attention when it was brand new. I'm not sure really what happened to it. I'll give some ideas of what may have happened to it as we discuss, but it seems to have pretty much disappeared from regular discussion and notice, but it was hugely grabbing the attention of people when it first came out. There were even people doing other versions of it, samurai versions and Lord of the Rings versions and things like that. The original game is about the Saxon invasion of the British Isles, and it's irrevocably entwined with its campaign game. As a game on its own, it's okay, but what really makes it interesting is the campaign portion of the game. So we'll try to discuss a little bit about what I'm referring to. Now, this is very typical of a Too Fat Lardy game of its period. Each new production from Too Fat Lardies has taken their quality further and further forward. This is a beautiful book. I think this came out after Chain of Command, but before Sharp Practice. I was looking earlier for a copyright date, but I can't find one. But I'm pretty sure that's about where its fitting was. But it's a very well created book. It has some of the layout issues that older Too Fat Lardy games have, but it's a very pretty book. It's a huge step forward. What you got for the game was this soft cover, glossy book, a set of Dux Britanniarum cards, and this beautiful color map of the British Isles showing you the various kingdoms that make up Britain at the time. This is set just around the collapse of the Roman support, the Roman Britain period, so 430 or something to about 600. What it says here, 410 to the end of the 6th century. And it begins by talking about setting up your campaign. Campaign is very important to the game, so the first thing you do is based around that. You select what kingdom you're going to play in, and there's a whole section in the back where it describes the various kingdoms as shown on the map. It breaks Britain into areas. Like the campaign we were just running was set in the Old North, but it's got the Saxon shore, the cities of the south. It lays out the different kingdoms that are in those areas. What year you're involved in is going to be affected by the area. In fact, in all the write-ups, it gives a suggestion for what year your campaign should start at if you're going to be in that area or in that kingdom. The length of your campaign will be based on where you choose, because the kingdoms have different numbers of provinces, and the fewer provinces they are, the nature of how the campaign works, the shorter your campaign is going to be. Because once your kingdom falls to the Saxons, your game is over. That sounds a little definitive. I just sort of made it sound like the Romano-Brit is always going to lose. But it kind of is. The exception being to that is that if you're playing it to the goal of reaching your character's goal, say in the case of the Romano-Brit, he becomes king, you don't have to play it to the fall of the kingdom. You can play till either the Saxon or the Roman becomes king, but it is the way it's typically going to go. So you select the kingdom, then you build your forces. Your beginning forces for most of these armies is all the same. There isn't a second book. This is the Raiders for Dux Britanniarum. It adds the Picts, Scotty, Irish, and the Age of Arthur. So this adds your raiding forces to the game. It can add extra armies, and in a way that's really intriguing to me, it makes it very easy to expand it into a multiplayer game. The game was originally written to be a two-player game, Saxon and Romano-Brit. A little creativity can advance that. The campaign that we were just running was for, I don't know, 6 of us, maybe 8 of us. Basically, your starting army is laid out by what you get when you start. You will need to buy more figures with time, but it's still 2 starters in this book, for instance, is what, 44 figures for the Romano-Brits and 38 for the Saxons. So the starting armies are relatively small. You could get some more figures than that as time goes by. There's cavalrymen that become available, some extra units, but you have to earn those anyway, so you work your way into it. You got a lot of time to prepare for that. So the next thing you do is you create your characters. This includes things like their age, their general physique. Some of them may start with a nickname and therefore a reputation, various attributes, their backgrounds, and then their starting wealth, which is important, and the particularly for the Saxons, and the age of your king. And that's important for the campaign because your king can die in the campaign. The next section is career path. This tells you where you start, what you get for that level, and what it takes. For instance, the starting British path is a tribune or lord, and to gain his first promotion, to become perfectus, that's going to cost him a tribune's tribute. So that's what the money's necessary for. Money's also necessary if you're the Roman to add defenses to your provinces to make your kingdom more defendable against the Saxons. I like the way they handle the money. There are 10 levels of money that all have little names, so instead of keeping track and being miserly, I have 25,000 gold. Instead, it's all rated as a rating between 0 and 10, and they all have names. So 0 is an empty purse. The highest 10th is the riches of Rome. So they have like narrative game-sounding names for it, which I find really enjoyable. So the objectives, they are simple. Achieving them is not. The British or Saxon lord, their objectives center around elevating their individual's position of status to military victories. Saxon player's overall objective is to capture his own British kingdom, subjugating one entire existing British kingdom rather than simply taking one or more provinces. That's his goal. That's why the number of provinces will matter. The British player's objective is to retain his kingdom. He can decide to be a king or a king's advisor and work his way up from that. Campaign structure is set around calendar months, with the campaign season beginning in March of each year and ending in October, allowing for 8 months of possible conflict. That's basically 8 fights a year. At the beginning of each month, the campaign season, the Saxon player will state if he wishes to initiate any action against the British, and this will result either in a raid or later a battle. What they mean by that when they say a raid or a battle is the Saxon can only do raids until he ends up as a warlord, until he's raised enough money to buy himself up his first promotion, and then you can enter into battles. For our game, that's been typically about 4 or 5 games before we get there. We've never done a battle, I'll be honest with this. We usually kind of lose the momentum of our campaign by about the time one of us has made it, one of the Saxons has made it to that level. The Saxons are what are driving the turns. Now, why I say maybe 8 games, part of the results at the end of a battle will determine when the next game is going to be, and I'll get to that as we go on. So the raids, there's a series of raid scenarios in the book, 6 of them I believe. They're typical raidy things. Each one has a little page that describes the map for the raid. It'll often have choices to be made. These choices are important. And then what each side's doing, the goals, what the table edges are. The reason I refer to those being important is, like in this case here, you're rolling for where the village actually is going to be. It could be on the far end of the table. The Saxons are coming on from here. So if you rolled 1 or 2, the Saxons have to get all the way across the table. But if you roll 3 through 6, it's only halfway across the table. So it can really affect how hard or easy it is. Also, these numbers around the edge, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, that's where the Romans are coming in from. If the village is in 1 or 2, and the Romans are coming in 3 through 6, it's going to be a little harder for the Saxons. There's a lot of luck in this game. And in most cases, the luck of the setting up of the scenario is the only way that the Romano-Brits can win. Some of the scenarios favor the Romano-Brits. and sometimes the luck of where things start. But it can go the other way around. The Saxons have the advantage. The Saxons begin the game with better troops. They have no levy. So they end up beginning the game with 2 Hearthguard or elite units and 3 warrior units instead of 3 levy, 2 warrior, and 1 Hearthguard unit that the Roman hunter Brits get. That matters. It matters a lot. The shield wall that the Romans can do is a huge advantage, but they have to be able to do it in time before it's too late for it to have any effect. The game is a little luck driven. Some people will really hate that, other people might like it. It's, again, pretty common to Too Fat Lardies. I mean, even how far you can move is rolled on dice. There's a lot of luck involved in any Too Fat Lardies game. Every army's got 3 starting lords, or any starting army has 3 lords and a champion. It is going to be driven by a card initiative system. You have a card for each of your big men or your nobles. The champion doesn't get one. I always just keep him typically with my my lord. And then there's separate cards for the skirmishers who don't need the activation of a lord or noble to cause them to go. When activated, a noble, they're all ranked between status 1 and 3. That status affects their range of command. It also gives them a certain number of initiatives. And the initiatives, just like any other Too Fat Lardy game, those have to do with what he can do. He can spend an initiative to move on his own. He can spend an initiative to get rid of a card he doesn't like and to replace it on the first action of his turn. The reason I say that, he can do that for free at the end of his activation. But if he does it at an expense at the first turn, then he can actually play the card that he gets. If he does it at the end of the turn, he can't play the card he gets. These are fake cards I'm talking about, and we'll talk about those in a moment. And of course, he can use an initiative to activate any of the groups under his command in his command range. Unlike most games, it doesn't do 2 actions. It's 1 action and it's move or fight. But if you move into a fight, you get a free move anyway. If you're missile units, you can move and shoot. The movement is usually 3d6. There's a plus if you're cavalryman. There's a couple modifiers beyond that. If you're going to move and shoot, for instance, as missile units, it's going to be 2d6. You lose. There's also losses of pips or dice for various terrain elements. I'm going to talk a little bit about the fate cards. We mentioned them already at the beginning. You begin with a certain number of specific fate cards based on your faction, what side you are, but you're going to have a hand of 5 cards. These are the fate cards I was mentioning. And some of those, like Desperare, that's just a wasted card. It just takes up a place in your hand. So you might want to get rid of that to get a new draw. But most of the times they're going to do like this one lets cavalry move quicker. Missile troops move quicker. This allows a leader to increase his status level by 2. However, you'll also notice this is what they call a suited card. There are 2 suits in the basic card deck. Later, there's additional suits if you're using the Raiders book. But originally, it's going to be the dragon for the Romano Brits or a boar for the Saxons. Suited card means it has to be played on a noble's activation. It does not have to be the activation of the same suit. So this card could be used by a Saxon, even though it's a dragon card. There are some advantages you get when you use them, your right cards for your side, though. A couple of these are purposely given to you when you begin, and others you gain later. Some of them also have pursuit on the bottom, or retreat, or pursuit and retreat. And on those cards, those have to do with the post-game phase, which I will hopefully remember to talk about when I get there. A campaign turn would begin by the Saxons deciding if they're attacking and what province they're going to attack. Then they would roll, if they're not a lord yet, they'd be rolling for a raid in the raid type. The rules of the raid tell you how to set up that raid. Activation is based on the cards. Movement, I already talked a little bit about when they move. There's only 2 formations in the game. It uses formations in the same way that Sharp Practice does. One unit, one group is never a formation. Your missile units can never be a formation. But formations are when 2 groups are put together. There's only 2 formations available in this game. Mob which is just a line of them, and you've done it to make them easier to control and move. Or available to the Romans only is Shield Wall, which gives them some really strong advantages. It reduces their movement. How much it reduces depends on the quality of the lowest quality of the troops in the shield wall. But it allows them to ignore the first kill in each group, which is substantial. There's no such thing as a column move in the game, or a column formation, so if units have to move in a narrow form, they're not formations. The combat allows for the involvement of your champions and your nobles. It's basically a d6 for everybody in there. There's certain cards that will give advantages to it. Some terrain can affect it. Both sides participate by rolling off and defending against each other. The person who causes the most casualties wins. There's a chart that shows what happens with that win. You may separate, you may continue to fight on for another immediate fight. It can be a little bloody. It is certainly the intention that you're going to get into fisticuffs with each other. Relatively easy to resolve and figure out. The game can kind of clump down into these fights, but that is sort of the point of the period. In fact, I think the game flows a little quicker than a lot of other Too Fat Lardy games, in no small part because it isn't a shooty game, because you are basically having to get in, fight, and then those things are resolved quicker than shooting does in sharp practice or chain of command. But there is shooting. You do have missile units. There's javelins, bows, and slings available. Some cards will give an additional missile benefit to non-missile troops by throwing darts before they go into a fight, which really only affects the shock level before you go into the fight. There's cavalry, both light and heavier cavalry available to some sides during the game. The cavalry is dangerous. If you're playing a game where speed is necessary, they can be good. But because they only have 4 troops in a unit, they're more brittle than infantry, and that can be disastrous. So you play out a game, you try to reach your objectives. At some point you decide when to leave. If you are the Saxon and you have achieved your goals and there's nobody blocking your exits, you can just say you're leaving. The opponent then decides whether he's going to contest. If he doesn't contest, you just go, and the game ends there. If he does contest, you're going to end up finding out the victory level by adding up losses and comparing them and comparing the success. But you also, the pursuit gives the non-leaving team, the challenging team, the ability to get modifiers to that chart, and the retreat gives modifiers to the defeat. So there's reasons to keep fate cards for the post-game phase as well, to help keep your level of victory up. And that's one thing you're going to do in the post phase, is determine what your level of victory is. The level of victory determines how fast you're available to return to the game. Your casualties are all divided into levels of 6s. And that also creates whether a light loss or a major loss. And the victory chart tells you how long it takes to recover. It's always going to be better for the victor than it is for the loser. So the Saxon, if he's fully recovered, can attack the next month. If he's not, he's going to wait until he is recovered to attack, and that shoots you through the campaign system a little quicker. That chart also tells you what monies you may have made during the game, and that's going to affect your ability to move up the campaign objectives, to buy your next level of lordship, to increase the amount of your holdings or the defenses when you're high enough of your provinces, and to advance through the game that way. Also, to pay the taxes. Your Saxon lord has to pay his taxes. Before he's actually a landowner, he has to pay a minimum taxes and support just to keep going. So there's a little bit of a pressure on him in the beginning of the game. Other things can happen. Your king can die. There can be famine and difficulties in your kingdoms. These are things that happen during the winter months that make it unable to continue. Anyway, the game is driven by a very similar morale system to most Too Fat Lardies game, a system of taking shock. The shock affects your combat and your movement. You end up losing your amphora if you have twice as much shock as you have people, but you'll fall back when you have more shock than people. There is an overall force morale where you keep track of the whole body's morale, and that determines whether you stay in the field or whether you leave. It also can determine, it's some of the guidelines if you have really low force morale on whether you can pursue a side that is leaving the field. Once you are a Saxon lord, you can now decide to go into battles. And battles differ primarily from, well, in the basic book, they differ in the fact that you are just playing side versus side on opposite side of the table games after that point. And I say basic game because Mike Whitaker is working on a compendium for Dux Britanniarum that offers a whole number of scenarios for the battles, which at present doesn't exist. The other major difference between battles is battles have a pre-game phase where you enter into trying to add your army's abilities. You can hire mercenaries, you can make speeches, you can give your men booze, and these things may or may not help you in the game, depending on how they work out. So all in all, I think it's an interesting game. I mentioned that we've lost momentum on it. It's a long process, and I've tried to run 2 campaigns of this game, and they've never gotten very far. In fact, they typically have stopped right around the time that one of the Saxons was ready to enter into battles. We've never made it through a full campaign year. I think the last campaign went the best, but it also was one of the hardest to do because there were, 6 of us or something, and it was pretty complicated. But we've always lost some momentum on it, and I think that may be one of the things that has challenged this game in the long run. Also, Infamy came out. It's the opposite end of the Roman involvement. It's the defeating of the Celts, the wars with the Celts between the Romans, as opposed to the remaining remnant of Roman culture defending itself against Saxons. But it is a more recent game, and as I think I said earlier, Too Fat Lardies games have typically gotten better and better with each new system. So some of that experience is visible in Infamy, which, a revision of Dux Britanniarum probably would be very good. But I wonder if they would bother. The game seems to have become somewhat obscure. Anyway, it is an enjoyable game. I do like it. The next video I'm going to post here will be a raid, and it is my intention to then do a battle to show you the difference between the two. I hope you've enjoyed that video. If you have any questions or you've had your own experiences with this game you'd like to talk about, please put that in the comments section down below. Also, if you have any further ideas for content you'd like to see us produce here on Havoc Wargaming, we look in the comment section for that as well. In fact, this video itself and the next 2 I'm only doing because of a suggestion that was made. I can't always do the suggestions, but when I can, when I've already got the rules and the figures, why not? So when I can, I will certainly endeavor to do what I can. If you like the video, I hope that you will hit like. I also have a buy a coffee account if you're interested in doing that. Right now, this page is entirely at my own expense. I've recently become monetized, but still, it's going to be probably a year before I see any money out of that. So there's some expense to doing a channel. I'm going to actually borrow an idea I saw from Oldhammer the other day too, which is a reminder, whether it's my page or another page, your likes and your comments and your support, that's what helps keep small providers like us alive. That keeps these videos coming. So I really suggest, whether it's my page, whether it's somebody else's page, show support where you can to the channels that you enjoy. It's one of the things that helps keep those channels going, and so they can continue to bring the content that you are enjoying to you. If you do enjoy my content and would like to see more, I hope that you will hit subscribe and ring our notification bell. Until next time, cheers.